Things are never quite what they seem. We think we understand the world around us, but we really only see the outside, what it seems to be. I used to be just like you. I believed in humanity, the newspapers, soap commercials, politics, and history books. But one day, the world kicks you in the teeth, and you don't have any choice but to see things the way they really are. I know one thing for sure. Nothing's ever going to be the same again.
Somewhere in the crowd, sometimes you find someone very special. Someone who hears the unheard. Someone who understands the mystery. Sometimes there's someone who sees with a third eye.
Alright, just recording for a second recording, but this is more to do with critical thinking, right? And what critical thinking is, I'll clearly go into it, right? It's basically questioning everything you hear, right? Instead of being told what to think, you know, like when you watch TV and that. When you watch the news and stuff, you just accept what they say, right? Critical thinking is questioning what they say. So this is what I'll go into, right? And I'll start off with the example briefly put in real life, right? You know, if something goes on, you know, like with your family or something, or personal issues, you always use critical thinking. You know, if someone's doing something behind your back, whatever it is, you're suspicious of something, you critically think, right? You ask yourself, you question those things. But when you listen to the newspapers or anything like that, or the mainstream media, which you'll go into, you actually accept what they say. So this is what I'm going to go into further on. But I'll start with, is stuff like, we'll start off with this New World Order, right? And what I've been talking about before, whether you call it conspiracy theories or not, even based on conspiracies, this is where it comes to doing research and not listening to what you were told. And that'll be up to you what to do after hearing this. But I just ask you to listen to me, you know, to critically think, ask yourself things instead of being told what you're told. So we'll start with this, right? We'll start with this thing called the New World Order, dating back to the Rothschilds, right? Just have to read it up and look back then. This is where, you know, like the first war, this was the Civil War in America. I said it on the last recording I mentioned, but I'll briefly say this thing to do with the Rothschilds. It started then, you know, just after the Civil War, and then there was a central bank put in America. And on what I was saying, that is where these central banks have all ended after all these wars based on deception. These people own these banks across the world, central banks, first in America, right? And now all the other bigger countries in the world, apart from Russia, China, and a few more, which you'll get into on that, but the countries they control. And obviously, if you do research, and that, I'll link a video on it on the end of the video in the description, but you will see in America this thing called the Federal Reserve, right? It's a privately owned bank. It's not owned by the government, for starters. You look that up, it'll be on the video, and you actually find that as proof. I think it's the blue pages or something like. It's not on the same pages, but you do that, right? But what I will say is, on this thing called the New World Order, they obviously, you know, because it's money, look at the size of America after Columbus discovered everything like that. You know, it was a highly populated country, you know, a very big populated country, America. So obviously they wanted to make sure they got a big income with the central bank in the biggest populated country, more people, more money, with a money system, which is why they set up a bank in North America for starters, right? We'll start off with that. I mean, that's just, you know, logical thinking, you know, that's not rocket science. But yeah, after every single war, you know, that since, since the Civil War, any war since then, all the way up to World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, all of them, they've been, based on deception. There's been money involved, but we'll go into that. We'll go further into that, and then we'll start off with the people who started it. It was the Rothschilds, right? And I've mentioned them before. Now, if you want to just listen up to this, and if you're still skeptical, well, listen to what I've got to say. And this is, this is proof. This is research. What from these rumors, conspiracy theories, you want to call them? Well, the Rothschilds. You look at Israel, which is rumored, if you want to call it that, to be the headquarters of the Rothschilds, right? And if you look on the maps, Google Maps, or even do your research, you'll find out in Israel there are names of family members, ancestors of the Rothschilds named after them in Israel. And then you ask yourself, look at Israel itself compared to the rest of the Middle East. They're supposedly Jewish, not real Jews anyway, but you know what I mean? And you know what I mean, when it comes to, race sort of thing, like, you know what I mean? Those people are white and that, everyone else is Arabic in the Middle East. And you know what I mean, you look at that and you know that Israel since 1940 something, it's about 1947, around that time, they suddenly took over most of Palestine, which used to be Palestine, its own country state, you know what I mean, until they invaded there. And then, you can you do research on the Rothschilds again, and you'll see, the last time I saw, they were worth $500 trillion. And that's a lot of money when you think about it. That's, I guarantee, the most richest family in the world, And that's not right, going into this conspiracy of the New World Order. And the fact that, these people, the Rothschilds mainly, there's the Rockefellers, not sure about the Morgans, but definitely the Rothschilds, Rockefellers. But the Rothschilds, you never hear about them. They're like a shadow, you could call them, when it comes to things like that. And therefore, when it comes to the conspiracy of shadow governments, it makes you ask yourself why these people have so much money, why they're connected to Israel, like I previously mentioned, and yet they're so, under the covers, like they're nothing to do with the governments. That's critical thinking. Ask yourself these questions. I do the critical thinking, then make you ask those questions yourself. And this is where it goes into more deeper. We're going to subliminal messages that people never, because subliminal, people don't realise what subliminal messages are. They're usually there without people realising, and they're saying something without people realising, unless they catch on, which I'd assume they never thought they would. But going to Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, if you research that, their slogan is, by way of deception, thou shalt do war. And you've got to think about wars, what I've been saying about wars are based on deception. Referring back to the HQ of the world, Israel, Rothschild, etc. Why would their slogan be, by way of deception, thou shalt do war? Because to me that says, by deceiving the public with deception to make them believe something else, we can do wars. And like I said on the last recording about the $1 bill, on the American $1 bill, you look at that, on the back of that. You can even look, even if you're not in America, look on the back of that, like I said before. These the Illuminati pyramid. That's the Illuminati pyramid. So when people are ridiculing it, saying, "Oh, it's just a joke. It's too crazy to imagine. You're stupid. It's like a film." Look on the back of that $1 bill, and you'll see this thing which is known to be the Illuminati, the $1 bill. When you look at it, it's the Illuminati pyramid, and as I said in Latin, it says "Order of the New World," and that's just another subliminal message, which these people never expected to catch. And then the same as 7/7. If you watch the Ripple Effect documentary, another subliminal message on the side of the number 40 bus, there was outright terror, bold and brilliant slogan. You know what I mean? Written on on the advert of that bus. Now that's a subliminal message again. When you think about it, what happened on that day. And then you've got to ask yourself, especially with that, how supposedly, humane are the people who put that shot on the side of the bus? How humane are they to actually put a subliminal message on the side of a bus of, of an inside job, false flag, terror attack? So, you know what I mean? That's already, that should make, critical thinking. And then we'll go to referring back to Ripple Effects, which was researched and found out to be the people in charge of Variant Systems and Israeli, again connected to Israel. Variant Systems, Israeli CCTV, actually own the CCTV on the London Underground, right? For starters, the same people who, coincidentally couldn't capture any footage of the 4 Muslim men who were supposedly, they supposedly bombed London Underground, stuff like that. They couldn't find that. How couldn't they find that? Ask yourself that. But also, as I said, you look into them. You look into Variant Systems, Israel, and you will see on their website, which I posted on my Facebook page, Mace the Amazing, M-A-C-E the Amazing, that they actually own CCTV, run the CCTV of 50 countries in the world. You know what I mean? Well, referring back to the Rothschilds, Israel, where I was saying that they're very rich and that they have most of the countries in the world in their pocket, which means that 50 countries are in their pocket that they own already, but they're a shallow government. They make people believe the puppets, as you call them, are running those countries. But yeah, referring back to if they actually run the CCTV in London Underground, it means that they run the CCTV across the United Kingdom and the other 49 countries in the world, for starters. So you just got to think to yourself about that. Just going through what I've noted down. Alright, and then we'll refer back to the Civil War, right? And what the suspicious things like out of behind that is where you do research again. This is what doing research does. Abraham Lincoln, read up about that man. He was assassinated not long, after him being in power. If you research into that, it was something to do, let's just say something to do with this central bank that had been placed in America. And he wanted it rid of from American soil. So American citizens obviously could, weren't in this debt system for starters, right? And this man was suddenly assassinated for starters, right? And then you want to go further into it, fast forward in time, President JF Kennedy, same man who wanted to do the same thing as Abraham Lincoln was suddenly assassinated. Referring back to the central banking system, Rothschilds, who are rumoured, let's just say rumoured if you want to go along that lines, if you're sceptical. You know what I mean? These two men were suddenly assassinated by these people who I were talking about. Critical thinking, ask yourself why. So yeah, and there is a, I don't know if I refer or remember something to do with JF Kennedy, not long before he died, before he was assassinated, which was also suspicious, that he said he was going to basically tell the American public about something, a secret about people that they shouldn't know, what nobody knows about. And then suddenly the man was assassinated. You can't connect those things, Then we'll move on to just going through things, Right, we'll move on to fast forward to time to this thing to do. Right, we're rumoured with the World War III. If you're sceptical to think it's going to be World War III, New World Order, everything like that. Well, we'll move on to if anyone's thinking I'm biased towards Russia or whatever this, we'll go into this, right? Think about Russia versus America, or whatever you want to see it. And we'll refer to the 9/11 things. If anybody's done research into that and discovered they were false flag and everything leading from 9/11, well, ask yourself, critical thinking again. Have you heard or any kind of conspiracy, Russia, China, North Korea, any of those countries, rumoured to be doing false flag, or have ever done any false flag operations like 9/11, 7/7 Madrid? And then ask yourself, connecting back to 9/11, US government, 7/7 UK government, owned by Israel, etc. Ask yourself, this is because I'm never biased, So this is me just being real, honest about everything. Russia's never done or even been rumoured to do false flag operations on home soil or any other country's soil. So when it comes to that, ask yourself, critical thinking again. And then we'll move on to this. As anyone knows, I've not been watching the news, but I've seen on articles this thing where people are saying that America being oppressed and Russia's the enemy through media deception. Ask yourself this now. Look at who's on whose soil, right? Who's attacking who, or who's ready to attack who? Well, as you know on the news, it's known that NATO forces are on Russia's borders, right? They're the ones on their borders ready to attack Russia. And Russia haven't attacked them, they're just waiting for them to attack. Russia have been having drills, and drills are obviously preparation for self-defense, like tactics for when they attack, so they know how they're going to attack so they can attack themselves. But as you see, put it as an example, that if Russia the oppressors and Russia the attackers and the enemy, how come they're the ones sitting there just waiting to defend themselves? Because I've said, but I don't know if this is dubbed out, but I'll say again, it's like an example of two men standing there. One is threatening this man, saying, I'm going to hit you and stuff. And the other man's standing there saying, I won't attack you unless you attack me. I don't want violence, but if you take a swing at me, I'm going to have to fight back to defend myself. Well, the man threatening to attack is America, NATO forces, and Russia is the man defending himself, standing there saying, look, I won't attack unless you attack me, but I will defend myself. Simply put, it's just critical thinking, things they never ask you to do. And this is why critical thinking is something that everybody should have a skill as. We'll move on now. Moving on to whatever else I'm looking at on my screen. Just hold on a second. Then we'll move on to Edward Snowden, Bradley Manning, two whistleblowers, right? These two men, they whistleblowed. Basically, they leaked information about illegal activity of the US government, what the US government were doing. I'm not sure about Bradley Manning, I think it was more military based. But as you saw, Bradley Manning was in prison without trial. They didn't even give him a trial. And they called him a traitor, and it was treason for doing that. When the government were doing illegal activity which the government ironically say they're against and arrest people for doing. And we'll move to Russia and the Edward Snowden connection. Basically, you ask yourself, why are Russia giving Edward Snowden refuge, and yet the country who want to extradite Edward Snowden back to America to do the same as Bradley Manning, imprison him without trial? Why are Russia giving Edward Snowden privileges of refuge so he's not extradited back to America to be, in prison without trial for leaking information about illegal activity which the US government were doing to American citizens, spying on them and other countries, which is illegal. and nobody would have known about that if it wasn't for this man. So you got to ask yourself that critical thinking again, right? And as I said, pointing to Edward Snowden, this man obviously saw from analysing what happened to Bradley Manning, which is why he left American shores with the information that thousands of pages of documents, evidence actually from the NSA he was working for. Yeah, so he left, went to Hong Kong. So when they found out, they obviously couldn't do the same to Bradley Manning because he'd be out of the country. So the man thought that he was an agent, so he already had the intelligence to do that. But yeah, you got to ask yourself. And basically, you know, people like this, even though people don't believe it, I mean, if they can't extradite Edward Snowden, they will blacklist him. And blacklisting basically is something where someone like that who goes against them, they actually try to murder them for leaking information. And then you've got to ask yourself, these governments who actually make out that they're humane and they do anything, you know, to not do that, why do they blacklist people? Someone like Edward Snowden, he didn't kill anyone, he leaked information. And if they can't extradite him back to their country, they will blacklist him, where basically they get them assassinated. This is what they do. You can look it up, research about blacklisting or suspicious deaths of ex-agents for secret services. I've seen one before, I can't recall where I saw it, but it was one of those things. Basically, they were blacklisted. They were poisoned. I think they went to a cafe or something like that. They basically had a drink not knowing that they'd been traced down. And what had been done, they'd had a poison put in their drink. And when they drank that, they obviously died. They were blacklisted. They were rogue agents. And they'd do the same to Edward Snowden. But I'd assume he's protected so much by the Russian government. Then they're making sure that he doesn't get blacklisted by any foreign agents, assassins, whatever you call it. People like that, you know. And as I said, this is another thing to ask yourself why about Edward Snowden. If you've heard recently, the US government are trying to block off donations going to some kind of charity of Edward Snowden. They'll arrest and imprison anyone who still funds this charity. They've made some kind of law or something to stop funding this man. You've got to ask yourself why they're doing it. All I know is, last time I heard, Edward Snowden only had leaked the general information given out about what they were doing to American citizens. And I recall him saying that he's got more information, but he's going to leave it there. This is out of assumption, but with good reason, because of the thousands of documents that he had, that he's going to continue leaking information, maybe, and needs money to fund this. I'm not sure, but it could be, because when I think about it, and this is just logical thinking, if they stop funds going to him from the country, the people who are supporting him, you know he's a patriot, a real patriot, that he can't obviously fund this thing he's doing to expose them more. Because obviously thousands of pages of documents, obviously this man has lots of information of things they know that if leaked, that's just a question, you know, maybe it's not, but there's a reason still they're trying to make sure they cut off funding towards him. And you've got to ask yourself why, thinking so far. We'll move on now. Just trying to keep in the zone of what I'm reading off my screen. We'll move on to invasions of countries for starters, right? When it comes to countries, think about the countries which have been invaded since 9/11, referring back to that. In the Middle East, Palestine, even though that is the Middle East, the Israel-Palestine conflict, Africa, all near enough third world countries. Countries without military defence, basically. As I said, the only one who I can think of with near enough military defence, but nothing like them, is Iraq, who had or have old Soviet Union military stuff. Not very powerful compared to theirs. It will be weaker. As I said, but the rest of those countries, you know, they have much powerful defence. The countries attacking have militaries, you know, very heavy warfare, loads of stuff, cruise missiles, crazy stuff. And all these countries that have been invaded, not only are they defenseless to resistance, but, they've all had something in those countries, whether it's resources or ways of putting central banks referring back to that in them. Because as I was saying on the last recording, I believe I said, about, as I said, Afghanistan, Iraq, especially Afghanistan, the oil lines, which are now owned by the countries that invaded them. And oil is worth a lot of money, anyone knows that. It's one of the biggest money makers of the world. And then we'll refer back to Africa with that. I believe I said the reasons behind why they invaded there. But about the Ebola scam, because Africa also again has resources like oil and diamonds, which are also a big money maker. So basically anywhere through the war, deception of war, where these people can invade, known as the Rothschilds, Israel, where they can make money and more money off, they'll do. And, that's just critical thinking. When you look at what those countries had on them and suddenly, as seen, where suddenly they've made money out of invading or supposed wars over supposed terrorists, they've suddenly made more money. And as I said, the Rothschilds last time I heard about being one of maybe the richest family in the world, I'd assume. It makes you wonder, especially referring back to the Civil War, where they started their central bank. How have they got all that money all over all these years? Because they've been making money somehow, and so much money that they're the richest family in the world. And then you connect the dots. It's all about connecting the dots. Ask yourself why. Right, we'll fast forward to keeping on topic of this World War III rumours, if you're sceptical as it is a rumour, regardless. And we'll refer back to nuclear weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons. And you got to ask yourself why. Why do, as I said, I think since the Cold War, after all that happened, why do the American government, the UK government, I believe in a few more, why do they still have weapon access and the power, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear power? Ask yourself why, right? Why didn't they destroy them? Because apparently, they were trying to avoid using them in the Cold War, something to do that. And then, which is why any weren't used as far as I know. So if they were trying to avoid that, why have they kept them? Why didn't they destroy them? Why did they have use for them? If they know how devastating they'll be, you've got to ask yourself, because you see that a lot of countries still have access to them. So critically think, ask why. And then refer to World War III, what I said on the last recording. When you look back at the last war, World War II, what we're calling them world wars, devastation, and that was very hectic. But you look at warfare nowadays, what they have, cruise missiles, fighter jets with tracking missiles, lock-on missiles, all that stuff. And as I said, World War II, they didn't have access to nuclear weapons. That was after. So when it comes to this World War III, they're going to be able to use heavier power, nuclear power. And you've got to ask yourself, as I said, why have they kept it if they were trying to not use it? And as I said, then we'll refer back to North Korea, as you've heard, the US government, and you would have seen this on the news. They've been trying to disarm North Korea of their weapons of mass destruction, nuclear missiles. And you ask yourself why they're doing that when it's known or rumoured that North Korea, China and Russia will be in this nuclear war. Well, when it came to a war, obviously, if the US government and all the other governments were firing nuclear weapons, nuclear missiles, atomic weapons at North Korea, Russia, obviously, if North Korea had theirs taken away, it means they wouldn't be able to defend themselves or fire back, fight fire with fire. So that, ask yourself why, because that tells me they're trying to disarm them so they can't defend themselves. So, it's asking yourself who the real oppressors are and who are being oppressed when you look back at that. Just fast forwarding to what I haven't read up. So just stay with me. Right, we'll move to, well, this is a one for soldiers. Veterans, ex-soldiers who have been in wars. The ones who don't know about this, but, the ones who don't know about this, well, you want to do your research on this to all the soldiers out there. And you'll find out. When you're told that you're going to serve for your country in those wars, you're brainwashed, You're lied to by those governments. They say to you, you're doing it to protect your country, the children, the women, the children in this country, everyone in this country. It's for security because of you were brainwashed as everyone else that these are terrorists, Islamic terrorists, everything, especially since Afghanistan, Iraq. And if you're not one of those unlucky soldiers of maybe tens of thousands or more, if you find out and look through it, you'll find that a lot of those soldiers, especially since then, I think even the Gulf War, a lot of them have been made homeless after those wars. They come back with post-traumatic distress and stuff, from seeing what they've seen people die, like shell shock, stuff like that. They come home with mental illnesses and they're all thrown on the streets. And yet, unless you're one of those lucky soldiers who weren't, shot on, those soldiers know themselves. They feel disgusted, obviously. They must feel disgusted. Upset, betrayed by their government because they were lied to. They were saying you're doing a favour to help us in the country. And then now a lot of those are on the streets or, with mental illnesses, they've just been shot and left like a bit of dirt. They were used like a tool. And afterwards they were just thrown on the street like a bit of dirt, like they were nothing. And this is what I try to address to those soldiers who don't know about it, or maybe soldiers who are about to go, who know or have been told about this conflict with Russia, the possible war that's about to happen, what they've been told possible, even though it's planned, but we won't go into that. Well, it's going to be more hectic after that anyway. This is why to try to address. If you do research, and I posted it on my Facebook page again, Maesty Amazing, and you look or even do research in Google about a lot of homeless soldiers who have been trapped like that, you'll see you could be one of those. And this is why I try to put it across with this possible war, whether you're skeptical of it being World War III, that you are the reason. Soldiers, air pilots, all of that, all of them, anyone who works in the military, you're the only way that they can start this war. If you refuse, if you realise what it's about, and all of you refuse to go into it, it means that war can't happen, because you'll be the people, the soldiers, air pilots, all of them. You'll be all of those people that are used, used for their war. You got to ask yourself, do you want to be part of this thing used on deception to kill innocent people, pointless war, stuff like that, and then to be shot on and treated like everyone else, especially other soldiers who have fought in these other wars based on deception, referring back to thou shalt do war by deception. Just ask yourself that, That's what I try to put across. So simply put, without you, this possible World War III will never be able to happen, because you'll be the people making that war. So ask yourselves that. Just going through whatever else I've read. Before I move on anyway. And then before we move on anyway to what else we're going to talk about. People always, as I said, how it's been deceived or perceived about this New World Order thing. Even when I saw it, I thought it was a joke, I thought that's too insane, to even believe this supposed thing called the New World Order. It sounds like a joke. But if you put the religious aspect aside, all the Lucifer and all that stuff, even though what I've previously explained about the $1 bill especially, it's not hard for that to happen, if you actually look at it on a serious side instead of doubting it. It's not hard for these people to suddenly imply that. You've seen how things have been implied, martial law, like the martial law in Thailand. In Thailand, they suddenly said, all they had to do was say, we're we're bringing in martial law, and then it was martial law. There was no, obviously that's dictating. The people of Thailand weren't, they were being dictated to, so there were no democracy involved anyway. They were told that martial law was being done. And it's easy as this thing called the New World Order, take away the Illuminati pyramid and all that stuff, and just imagine it as a government thing, without the religious side, Illuminati period and all that stuff behind it, what makes it sound absurd. To see it as that the government would day these 50 countries owned by the Rothschilds, or most of the governments in the world, they could easily turn around one day. They could say they've had a meeting and now this is the New World Order. We've got a one world government, one world army. You all belong to us. You don't have any rights. You do this. You do what we say. It's simple as that. And people don't realise. And going along with this conspiracy, the World War III, where I've said after it will be the New World Order, referring back to what David Icke says about World War I, II and III, the global agenda, one world army, one world government. That's all they have to do. And after this World War III, they will say, this is the third world war the world has had, and we can't keep putting up with this, even though they were planned. The only solution we have now, we've all come together as nations and said, look, there's going to be a one world government, one world army. And what you will realise is it's basically a martial law, and you will be dictated to. It won't be a solution. It's just a way of them fooling you through the deception what they've used, which I'll go on to about mainstream media next, and we'll go further into they've stalled you through these wars, through history, why they make money. For starters, money making is referring back to the Civil War, the wars after that. They've been stalling people why they make money, so they've got enough money to do this New World Order thing. All these false flag attacks. So when it comes to this thing, the New World Order, they've stalled you so much and distracted you especially. When it comes to it, they'll have all the money they can as a one world government, etc., etc. And then they'll be able to turn around and show their real side and say, look, this is basically a martial law in another way, a worldwide martial law, and you're going to listen to us. You are our slaves, as simply put, and you will be dictated to. So I'll stop there, and then I'll move on to what I'm going to talk about next.
It's hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people. These were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who we rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While all those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks in the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on Earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight.
Right, I'm going to move on to media deception again, right? We'll move on to that. With the television itself. And I talk about analysis of human behaviour, stuff like that. Analysis of human behaviour, stuff like that. You know how I analyse people. Well, with the TV and the mainstream media, they did the same thing with the public. Not just the countries of those corporations that run them, but the world. They saw how much they could fool the public with the mainstream media since mainstream media began. And just by analysis of how The public reacted as people when they told them lies. They've done the same, and the more people have fell for those lies through media deception since they started doing it until now, the more they've taken everyone for granted every time with the lies. And to the point as it's seen that nowadays the public will just sit there and believe everything they're told, you know, without even asking questions, using what I've been talking about, the topic of this critical thinking, because they've took it away. Basically, they've took away critical thinking from people, from society. They've made people just listen to what they say. They'll say, this is what's happened today. This is a murder, anything like that, and they'll just sit back and they'll say, oh, okay, that's it, that's what the public will say. They won't critically think. And they did that, you know, from the beginning. It's analysis of human behaviour, how people react to the public. And they've took you for granted. That's why they do it, to the point that nowadays, when you've seen things to do with politics or war, you'll sit there and they'll say, oh, this is what happened, and you'll just sit back and go, okay. You won't even critically think, you won't even ask yourself, referring back to in real life. Yet something happens to your family, friends, you'll critically think, you'll ask, why did he do this, etc. So you know what I mean, it's simple as that, you know. It's just like a brainwashing tool, and it really is more than you think, more of a conspiracy, but has real good backup to it, you know. It's not hard to analyse people, especially when TV is based on psychological deception, you know, especially things like that. It's all based on psychology, and that's what they used, psychological analysis of the public, how people reacted, and then they used another tool, psychological deception, to use it through mainstream media to fool those people, fool the public. And this is where I refer back to World War III, how they've been stalling you, using this media deception, psychological deception, to keep you stalled, to not critically think until this World War III comes along, because the brainwashing tool they use, obviously, to keep you fooled and stall you until this thing happens, so it's too late. You know, it's there to fool you, you know. To stall you, because you believe everything they say. You don't critically think, because they've took critical thinking away from you to ask things. And that's not right, you know. I mean, this is just logical thinking more, you know. And you think about it, you know. And I'll just say right now that I've never actually studied psychology in school or anywhere. I learnt this myself, you know. So yeah, you know, it's just a deception. And as I said, this is where it comes along, that they know they don't want you to critically think, to do research for starters, and just listen to what they've got to tell you when you watch that news. Because they know this brainwashing tool they use to brainwash the public, not just the world, but in their own countries, will keep you asleep. Because if you start asking questions or do research to the other side of the coin, which we'll get into in a minute, they know that more people will wake up, and the more people who wake up, the more people who will realise, you know, and this is where would be called a revolution, that people would realise and they'd rebel, because they'd know those mainstream media channels are owned by governments and corporations, what go to the top of a pyramid, and those people in power know that they're trying to keep people awake. So when this thing called the New World Order comes along, everyone will be asleep, you know, and they'll be able to catch you with your pants down, basically, you know. And that's what they want to do about this New World Order thing. Basically, said the brainwashing tool to keep you awake through psychological deception, referring back to wars being used as deception. When it comes to that, you know, nobody will have critically asked these things, woke up like me, trying to rebel for good intentions, to show other people such as yourself, if you're listening. So you know what I mean? It's just logical and critical thinking, you know, and it makes sense. And yeah, then we'll move on to if you actually do your research about government-owned mainstream media and papers, you actually find out, which I just discovered, that all these mainstream channels, even the mainly media, what we're talking about, who brainwash you, are owned by 6 corporations in the whole world. You've got to ask yourself that. And as I said on the last one I made, the last recording I made, like this, I said if you look at, in your own country itself, if you look at BBC One, ITV News, Channel 5, stuff like that, if you could watch all those channels at the same time when they report about politics or wars, you see they say exactly the same thing as the other channel said, nothing different. And this is where it connects to these 6 corporations owning them. And then we'll refer back to the Rothschilds, etc., etc., who are the people who own the governments, who own the mainstream media channels, the elitists, the shadow people, as I said, shadow government. Ask yourself, why are they shadow governments as well? Why are the people actually running the world but have to stay in the shadows and make you think that prime ministers, presidents are the ones who are actually calling the shots, who are saying this and that? Why are they doing that? Why do they have to keep a secret and fool you, deceive you into thinking these prime ministers, etc., are the people in charge? Why are they doing that if they've got nothing to hide? Referring back to what I've said so far. And then we'll move on to things like newspapers and things like that. You know, when it comes to elections and that, and you notice this a lot if you use analysis. This is what I've analysed from years ago, man. What I noticed earlier as well, what they do. You know, when it comes to elections and they have supposed rivals, which we'll get into, they always show pictures of them deliberately, weirdly, always visiting hospitals, visiting kids, sick people and that. Trying to make themselves look humane and stuff. You know, if you look on my Facebook page again, you'll see it. And this is not just Tony Blair, David Cameron, but even presidents do it. Even American presidents do it. They always use the same method. Show pictures to the media, whether it's news or papers, of them shaking sick kids' hands in the hospitals and that, because they deliberately do it. You know, they basically sit at a table and say, "How are we going to win this election? How are we going to win this? How are we going to get for the public?" What we'll do is we'll get the newspapers, media, who we own, to show us going to hospitals, visiting sick people, being friendly, you know, so we look like humane people, and they'll see us as people's people, the kind of people they see with personality. Psychological deception again. And if you look back, you'll realise they do the same thing. And that's what they do to make themselves look humane and nice and all that stuff. Psychological deception to make people see them as humane people, whatever you want to see it. As I said, which I noticed earlier, in the newspaper it shows David Cameron hugging a lamb, right? It's another thing they do, you know. It's just to make them look humane to you, so they look like the kind of people you want to vote for. And then we'll move on to, which I noticed, David Icke, whether you think is a conspiracy or not. Well, I'm that type of dude, you know, critical thinker, not conspiracy, not critical thinker. Saw what this dude posted anyway about. It's basically said, "Welcome to the Lib Lab Con Party," and what it's saying is, Liberal Democrats, Labour, Conservatives are all the same party, right? They're all, as I said, referring back to who owns these governments in the first place. So it doesn't matter who you vote for, but psychological deception they use again to make you think they're different parties. They do, you know. Is that deception? But as I said, use an analysis if you're old enough. Looking back, maybe if you're 30, 40, around that age. Use an analysis of what any party you voted for, you know. If when you voted for Conservatives, next time you vote for Labour's Conservatives, no good. What you'll find out is all those promises you were told before elected. It doesn't matter who you voted for since you started. They've all lied to you, you know. And I use this as an example. If you had a time machine, on the next election, if you voted for Labour or whatever, you'll find out they'll lie again. But if you could rewind time and say, actually, I'll vote for Conservatives this time, and you did that, you'd find out even if you did that, they'd do the same thing, they'd lie to you, because they're owned by the same people. And there's no democracy anymore, you know. So it's an example of, and it actually shows there's no democracy anymore. Because when they're saying vote for us because we'll do this for you, because we serve for you apparently, and that's democracy, right? We'll listen to you, because democracy, right, if you don't know it, which you should do, is that they serve for you and you're the public, and they do what you ask them to do. But what you find out is there's no democracy, which shows a lot more into it. So, it's just all psychological deception, man. And it's used mainly by the media, as I said. Well, if you've been listening so far anyway. And then we'll move on to, when it comes to apparently conspiracy nuts versus mainstream media, if you're the type of people who trust the media and see what your brain wants to believe, or let's just say you watch the mainstream media and you don't believe in conspiracy nuts. Well, there's always two sides to a story, right? And we'll use this as an example, a courtroom. In a courtroom, when you go into a courtroom, there's two sides, right? There's the convicted and the victim, say. Well, that's an example. So you've got to see it as that, right? Mainstream media, conspiracy, and the conspiracy theorist and mainstream media. In a courtroom, you've got to listen to both sides to make your verdict. So when you're ignorant and you're that kind of person that will sit there and say, now I'll continue watching the news, I won't even bother listening to what this conspiracy person says. Well, you're being biased for starters, because if you were in a courtroom, would you sit there and listen to one side of the story when you know the other person has their side to make your verdict whether they're guilty or not? And this is where it comes to mainstream media versus conspiracy theorists. You've got to listen to both sides in that courtroom, let's put it in that analogy example, until you can, make that verdict, which is why I've said before, when like the 9/11 conspiracy videos, that you're ignorant and, biased towards mainstream media to even dismiss, even listen to them. You've got to listen to their side as well. So, that's all you have to do, look at the other side of the coin and even consider it, because this is what I was like. I was like you before. Saw everyone as the conspiracy nut and the mainstream media were new before I went down this path. But what I'll say is, referring back to the old video, when I actually considered, and I sat there and watched this 9/11 conspiracy video, it was the first thing in that video that made me question the official story from the mainstream media, etc. That made me question something to say, that's not right. And I was drawn in, because before I heard that, I was sitting there being ignorant, thinking, this is bullshit. Then I heard the first thing to make me question the official story, and suddenly I was mesmerised. My ears were drawn in, and I sat there for the whole hour. And I was just like you before. And that's all you have to do. Whether you have to fast forward to the main points, what they question, the critical thinking which they used. And you will discover from that. So that's what you have to do, You can't be biased or ignorant or closed-minded. Because as I said, if it came to a courtroom, for example, you wouldn't listen to one side and the other person and then make your judgment. Well, it's the law for them to listen to both sides anyway, but you know what I mean. So when it comes to mainstream media versus conspiracy theorists, always listen to both sides, consider before you make that judgment. Simply put as that. And then something I just noticed, referring back to this New World Order conspiracy. We'll move back to that. I didn't mean to do this, but we'll move back to this New World Order thing. And what I say about this New World Order thing, about what's going to happen. Yeah, if you notice in America, right? If you notice, which should make you suspicious for starters. Recently, look at Copblock or any sites or even Google search that the American police, they've become militarized in America, You do research and that you will find proof from even media, and you'll see the pictures. American police not walking around in suits, normal blues and twos, whatever you call it. They're actually walking around in body armour, carrying assault rifles with scopes, all militarised, grenade launchers, armoured vehicles, actually military, And that's not right for starters, So, you've got to ask yourself why they're doing this. And this is where I came along to. Even though a conspiracy video, it did have decent backup, media sources to show what's happening. With this World War III thing and the start of the New World Order, all I will say, even though a theory, is why World War III is going on in the world, across Europe, Russia and that, why they're fighting. the world will be distracted from this martial law going on in the USA, which will start. And the martial law, as I said, is another word for New World Order being dictated to. So why the world's distracted by something as hectic as World War III with nuclear missiles? You know how crazy you can imagine. The New World Order will be starting in the country where they first put a central bank. Where they first controlled the world. They'll be the first place they controlled with money and central bank. They'll be controlling with martial law, New World Order, while the world's distracted by World War III. And then you can refer to this militarised police and stuff. Just look at that. Look at real news footage if you're a skeptic to see how they're acting recently. You know what I mean? Like when people are protesting, they've got megaphones, all military gear. They're acting like an army, like some kind of... I mean, I've seen it myself. It's scary stuff, you know, when you look at how they act. They're like some kind of... It's like seeing, you know, it's crazy when you see it, you know. It looks something insane. It doesn't look like what you would think of the police, especially normal police. And then they're referring back to, the thing with the UK police and the US police. Well, if you know about the US police research, again, that's what you need to do. In America, right, the US police, which I saw have a blue code, right, where basically honest cops have to stay quiet about corrupt cops, because if they speak out against corrupt cops, the blue code is that the honest cops will be punished for it. They'll be in prison, they'll lose their job. And this is where it doesn't make sense. Critical thinking again. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself why, right? When a corrupt cop is reported by an honest cop, when the corrupt cop who's been doing illegal stuff, killing people, anything like that, you know, something that's illegal which is not part of being a police officer, why does that corrupt cop get to keep their job, paid leave, and remained on maybe a desk job or whatever? And yet the honest cops, they get threatened and imprisoned. Ask yourself why that. Surely the honest cop should get the paid leave for reporting the cop, you know, doing the illegal activity, and the corrupt cop should get threatened and imprisoned. If the world that you're believed to see by your government mainstream media, should move on to in a minute about that. It's supposedly like that. And it'll be the same as the UK police, you know. They'll be exactly the same. I don't know if it'll be called the blue code, but the UK code, the UK police is the same as that. They'll be run by the same system, you know, referring back to the powers that run the governments and that. That if honest cops speak out against corrupt ones, they'll be threatened and arrested, and the corrupt ones will keep their jobs. And that's what people don't realise, you know. And you can look, you know, behind any history, anything like that, right? And you can look up, right? And you can see things to do with that, you know. Where this, I mean, even though, when it comes to corrupt cops that have actually been convicted, which what I'll move on to first, the media deception, right? This is what I'll move on to. If you're middle class in the UK, I'm not sure about America, but middle class in the UK, this is the way I've analysed it, that if you're middle class or upwards, that again the media deception used, psychological media deception, is you'll see the police as different, right? You'll see them as kind, honest people doing their jobs and stuff like that, and your kids will be led to believe that. Because this is the thing, you have that money. It's because of money again that they won't harass you and show the real side of who they are. But if you're working class, poor, low working class or more, you'll see that you actually get harassed by them and treated like dirt because you don't have money. And you'll see the real side to that. If you live in council estates anywhere, anything like that, even if even as long as you haven't got money. But if you're middle class, I guarantee you've been led to believe a different side to them. And that's why they don't show you. So yeah, but as I said, sometimes through the media, I don't know if private or not, but you see in history there have been a lot of cops that have been paedophiles and stuff like that, you know. Things like that, you know. Anything like that. Even I saw recently with my local police that a police constable had been convicted of murdering his wife or something like that. There's loads, if you look, even if local news, national news, there have been cops that have been found up. So you know what I mean. But a lot of the times things like that are hidden from the public again, because if they're if it's the truth, something that through their deception to make you believe something else, they'll keep it undercover. Again, with media deception, psychological deception, and this is where we talk about division of people and that, you know, like division of people, whether it's our race, religion, stuff like that. You see, even in the UK, as I know, as the UK alone, before I live here, people are divided through right-wing parties, Britain First, stuff like that, because Muslim people or race, religion, anything like that, you know. And this is where, you know, the basically it's through the people who own these governments that bring those things along. They bring ideologies along, ideas, morals, through certain we'll say people, you know. In the UK, it could be cultures and that. And it's a lot of it's to do with the school system as well, but we'll go into that. But basically, you know, kids are brought up, and then through society, people are divided, you know. They keep everyone divided through that method, you know. So why people are hating on each other for stupid, ignorant things because of the colour of their skin or their religious views, you know. They're fighting amongst each other, and they're divided. So their real enemy, who are actually taking them for granted and lying to them, you know, you know what I mean, we call government, etc. Because this division method keeps all of those people fighting amongst each other. Therefore, they're not united with each other, and therefore they're distracted by what's really going on, and don't realise their real enemy are the people who actually made them divided in the first place. And you'll see that as an example. You can see it in a lot of places. You know, anywhere in the world, that division can be division of anything, you know. And they do that, you know, to make sure people are divided, fighting amongst each other. It's another way of distraction, is stalling. And this is the thing, referring back to Illuminati again. And this has been found, documented, proved. There have been government trolls, stuff like that, you know, making fake accounts on YouTube channels mainly, or Facebook pages, trolling what they call conspiracy theorists to make them look like a joke, you know. And they even do it with pages, I'm sure, and memes even themselves, you know, to, as I said, referring to how they made Illuminati look like it's something stupid and not to believe it, or the brainwashing they do. It's a psychological tactic. Make it look like a joke. Psychology is a very decent thing to use against the human. So when people see those memes saying, I think a Japanese dude saying Illuminati and stuff like that, and a.k.a. with the triangle around his nose saying, oh, it must be Illuminati, because they make it, you know, it's a psychological deception to fool people, to make them stay asleep, because they think, oh yeah, it does sound stupid, without even doing research, which they don't want you to do. You know what I mean? And then we'll move on to mainstream music and stuff like that. And if you really love your kids and that, we'll move on to this. I've mentioned this on my Facebook page. But you know, like mainstream music, if you see it now, especially if you're old enough to see before it turn around after 2000s, where it started going weird and not like music. And this is nothing to do with being old and that. But you know, it's basically another way of dumbing down the new generation, and they've been doing that since just before 2000, not long before that, but mainly after. Dumbing down your kids, the generation who, you know what I mean, who'll be old enough, probably around my age, to now around that age, to realise things like this. But I was lucky enough to wake up and see, you know, like the music, TV, if you watch it now, compare like a lot of kids shows, even kids shows, like TV shows, anything like music and that, anything like that, you can see that it's like dumbing down your kids, making them unintelligent, you know. And especially mainstream music, which I'll go into. This is basically subliminal. If you listen to that, or actually listen to what your kids are listening to, any of the mainstream rap, we'll talk about mainstream rap mainly. And you'll see that those rappers rap about the same stuff, you know. And they rap about killing, gangster stuff, killing, shooting people, selling drugs, you know, treating women with disrespect, going in clubs, all that stuff, you know. And, you know, it's a subliminal way of teaching your kids, you know, to be like that, you know. To end up wanting to be like that, even if they got a dad, you know. It's more, it can brainwash a kid without a role model, as I've said before, because these kids without mums or dads, especially dads on the boys' side, for what the stuff, rapping and gangster and all that, can brainwash them into wanting to be like that, copying, you know, imitating them. And I can use an example of a friend of mine who actually did this from 50 Cent's music, listen to his, which he raps about as well nowadays. This dude, I know, my friend, from analysis, when I talked to him on Facebook, the dude was imitating him, you know, and he's 17 years old. Probably been listening to him since he was 15, I'm not sure, I know, since a young age. But that's an example of one kid who also doesn't have a dad, so looked at him as a role model. Analysis. That, you know what I mean, he ended up imitating, saying he wants to be a hustler, sell drugs, kill people, shoot people, be a gangster, you know what I mean, all that stuff. And this is what, it's subliminal through music, mainstream music, to teach your kids to do the same, especially if you're a single mum and he hasn't got a father figure. But it's also female mainstream artists, what they do as well, you know, they teach your girls to do the same sort of things, take drugs and stuff, and disrespect themselves, you know. They're wearing bikinis and stuff like that, you know, acting like what you would call whores, right? Just being real about that. And your girls will do the same thing, they'll imitate them, thinking going clubbing, acting like a whore and stuff like that, yeah, is the way to be. Dudes end up doing the same thing, male whoring, you know, going down clubs. So you know what I mean? You don't realise how it teaches your kids, you know, it's subliminal. And as I said, referring to especially the ghettos, projects, anywhere with poverty-stricken areas, like black African-American artists who rap about stuff like 50 Cent and stuff like that. When they rap about that stuff, they're teaching African-American kids, young black kids in projects who haven't got dads, that they're seeing them as a role model, the same as my friend did. And they're being taught to stay in the projects, in the ghettos, kill each other, sell drugs and stay in that situation, which is more based on, and this is through theory, that it's a subliminal genocide, a subliminal teaching way of genocide for those kids. Because if you look at the history of African Americans in America, those people are stuck in poverty. But if you refer back to what a.k.a. says in Fire Booth, black people in America used to live in villages and that weren't living in poverty. And referring to Eric Garner, dudes like that who have been killed, and a lot of African American dudes, mainly in America, that racism still exists in America, right? It's just, again, it's just like a deception that it doesn't. But yeah, this is another way of depopulating African American people by the subliminal genocide messages in mainstream media, mainstream music, which is owned by those same people who control the world, America. To teach kids, it's just another way, you know, of basically brainwashing kids to go and kill each other, depopulate people, without even having to do it themselves. And you know, if you look into that, especially from analysing my friend, and this friend of mine is not even black, he doesn't even live in a council estate or anything. This is a dude, you know, a white dude and that. So you know what I mean, it can brainwash anyone, no matter their race or situation. And as I said, what you don't realise, the fan base of these of mainstream music, the fan base is probably 10 years old upwards, so it's 10-year-old boys, girls listening to that upwards, you know, and they're at that age where they're obviously learning how to grow up. And as I said, especially if they haven't even got a role model, father, mother, but they can still, even if they're going to grow up actually believing that's the way to live, you know, and it's bad, you know. So there's more to it. And as I said, yeah, with music nowadays, you would have to do your research, and this is called mind control. Just use mind control, even though it's Illuminati, even if you're skeptical. Take away the Illuminati, this is scientific, something like HAARP, H-A-R-R-P in America. subliminal, even telepathic, just near enough telepathic mind control is possible, It's just one of those scientific things they obviously keep away from people. But this stuff is actually put into songs like this mainstream music your kids listen to, and what it basically is invisible words, but through that audio, you can't hear it physically like the words the rappers are rapping, but on those tracks, those words are hidden. It could say, go and kill someone, go and rob someone, praise to the dead. It could say anything, and you won't hear that, and all you have to do is do research on it. I've read this last night. It's all scientific, but it's possible. It's basically like radio frequencies, and as people out their brains, they have brains basically have radio frequencies, and as long as you can make scientific equipment that can penetrate the skull and go on the same radio frequency as the brain, you can put messages into someone's brain, using telepathy through equipment. And you can even do it on tracks, As I said, it was mentioned, like therapy tracks and stuff like that with positive stuff on them. They do that on those, You'll be listening to someone silent, speaking gently and that, saying about something, but they actually add those invisible words, subliminal words, to help you on a positive side. But they do that with mainstream media, music to your kids, but negatively, And that's another thing people don't realise. And all you have to do is research mind control, like stuff like that. And those things actually exist. It's not hard to do, as I said. If you find out the frequency the brain uses, and you have equipment which scientifically today is possible to do, you can do that, So yeah, there's a lot behind stuff that you don't know about, but you got to ask yourself, do you want your kids listening to that stuff and what it teaches about? Then we'll move on to this is where the irony comes in. People like, if you've seen recently, although you might not, but if you're a hip-hop fan, you see someone like Immortal Technique. He was nearly imprisoned, or he was incriminated for something like, I don't know what it was, but they tried to make this dude look like a criminal and convict him. And we can refer to him and what he talks about. He basically raps about anything that exposes governments, or what we call the Illuminati. And this dude was convicted, and that, it makes you wonder, right, why don't they convict? Why aren't they arresting people who are rapping about drugs, guns and killing, and yet are arresting a dude like Immortal Technique who's talking about exposing crime, but they're trying to convict a dude who condemns crime? And it's the same as Low-Key, a UK rapper / Iraqi rapper. He was, I don't know, as I said, if he was actually convicted for it, but this dude who made the 2 terrorist tracks, on those tracks, if you listen, he's basically defending themselves, and he's saying in those tracks, how can you say I'm a terrorist, all this, when you've listened to my music, and even the hook says I'm about love and peace. All I do is expose criminals and talk about love and peace, and yet you're convicting me for being a criminal when I'm actually against crime. And there's 2 examples of 2 rappers / MCs who are convicted. And then you ask you why. They rap about political stuff. Why are they being convicted if what they're rapping about isn't true, for starters? Critical thinking, ask yourself this. And again, those 2 people, Immortal Technique and Low-Key, I'm sure if you don't know them, and especially if you listen to mainstream music, or your kids won't know about them. And yet these 2 dudes actually rap about stuff that matters, about what your kids should listen to if it's music. And yet your kids, why the TV, the mainstream music, TV channels, again referring back to who owns them, playing stuff like this to your kids and making them grow up to listen to that, if they're supposedly decent people or not. It's all about critical thinking, Just seeing what to move on to now. I'm nearly done, but you've just got to stay with me. I hope I'm not making you fall asleep. We'll move on to the school system and that. And when it comes to the school system and that, which I'll move on to what it leads to. basically in school you're taught briefly to that you've got to learn, obviously get an education, and then you've got to go to school, leave school, go to university, college or whatever, and then get a job. And you know, with university, I've never been, but I know if you've been university, you know what happens there. Ironically, you go to university to learn, to get a career and a job, to make money, but you end up getting yourself in debt from going to university. And then you have to pay those big debts off when you get a job. And you know, it's all about the, as I said, the money system, secret enslavement system that the human race don't realise is that you're living under, what you live to believe. Right, you leave school, here in the UK, you leave school at 17 onwards, right? And then until you're about 60 onwards, right? You know, I mean, you have to retire and that. And as I've said before, I don't have to mention it, but you know, by the time you're that age 60 onwards, as I said, you're too physically weak to even do the stuff you could have done, or have the freedom to do the stuff you could have done when you didn't work, you know. It's too late for that, you know. And then you've got to think to yourself, you know what I mean, from about 17 onwards to 60 or onwards, you know what I mean, all those years you've wasted in this life, supposedly free life you were given before money come around. You've got to ask yourself, was it worth that? I mean, I've worked myself before, and if, you know what I mean, so I know what it's like. But you know, as I said, full time, and you know, after a while, after a few weeks, you realise yourself, you start getting fed up of it. You start saying, I wish I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? I wish there was an easier way to it. I got to work for money, but this is too out of order, you know. And then you, as I said, which it seems a lot of people do. Look in the internet, it's everybody is always pissed off about tax and that. And this is where it comes to the secret enslavement, you know, taxes and debts and stuff that you work for. They get, you know, you're given taxes and you complain. And what you didn't realise, you're basically being taxed for things that you don't need to be taxed for, you know, and stupid things. And, you know, it makes you have to work longer and longer, especially like money inflation, deflation and stuff, which I'll leave a link to on that video I was talking about earlier about the money system. Because when they inflate it, I think, or deflate it, or whatever it is, you'll see it anyway. You have to work longer and more for it because the value of the pound, dollar, whatever it is worth less or more, less, and therefore they make you work longer. And then, as I said, you'll realise since 17 to 60 onwards, when you retire, that you've wasted most of your life working for this thing called money, paper, just to survive. Paying off, again, more things to do with money, debts, mortgages and all these other things you get into. And you make yourself work more for it because of these debts and mortgages for this house you have. And, you know, people don't realise, you know, there's, you know what I mean, as I said, people walk around the world because they don't see they're a slave. They get up out of bed every day. They can go out, it's not like they're a slave as what they would see as a slave, define as a slave, in chains, chained up in a prison, because they see themselves going out every day, going out in the street, walking around their towns, driving anywhere they want. They feel free, but they don't realise you're a slave to this thing called paper, the money system, which has only exist mainly as part of that system, ironically, coincidentally, or should we say, since this civil war thing to do with the central bank in America, Rothschilds, etc. So, you know what I mean? It really is an enslavement system, you know. Just people don't realise it because of the deception that they're free. But yeah, everyone across the world, you know, if you listen to that, whoever listens to this, you'll realise if you really look into it, you know. And you know, this is the thing with referring back to World War III again, because on the topic, which I just remembered, which I saw, you know, research recently or not long ago, you know, most American taxpayers' money, not sure about UK, but American taxpayers' money was going to the American military. And, you know, referring to this World War III thing, why the American military, critical thinking again, why are they suddenly having to spend most of the taxpayers' money on military warfare if there's no war, or they don't know a war's going on? Because this was way before even Russia And America were even having these conflicts with each other about this possible war. So how did they know another war was coming, to the point that they're stocking up on so much tanks and all that stuff, jet fighters, everything, ammo and stuff? Ask yourself, critically think, do your research yourself anytime on anything what I've said, look it up yourself, but ask yourself why, especially when even before Russia and America were even talking about this. And then refer back to this New World Order thing, Rothschilds, that since Civil War to the wars what have recently happened, they've all been planned, They've all been planned. They were already going to happen when they happened. That's what you don't realise. And when you put yourself to that question I just said, it's because they already knew this World War III is going to happen, and they're stocking up for it. And I don't know about the UK public, what most of your taxes are going on, but who knows, it could be military too. But you've got to ask yourself these things, do research. If you don't believe me, look it up yourself. It's not hard, internet's there, just make sure it's got good sources from decent media, decent backup to it, but you'll find out yourself, But yeah, this is where the money system is, and where I was talking about that money system where they've been having to make so much money since the Civil War until now and store you with lies and deception of wars and stuff so they can make more for the New World Order, that you're actually contributing to a system and a thing that's going to enslave you even more than you're enslaved now when it happens. So I ask you to consider that. You know what I mean? You're being taken for a fool by media deception for starters and everything. And you're being treated a fool, you're just walking around, basically walking into your grave, we would call it, without realising it. Thinking you're important to your country just because, as I said, you're living in a first world country like UK, not a third world country. Thinking you're important and you're contributing and everything's good and your kids are all safe and all that. And it's far from that, It's far from that. And your kids would end up doing the same. I don't think they will, because of this New World Order. It'll change from that. But as and before that, or if your kids are old enough, you would have said that, and even you would have thought that, as a kid. But for many years, they've actually been, a slave. You've actually been, all these debts and taxes that you work for have been going to the pockets of these people who are enslaving you, no matter what your position or how important you think you are. They're doing it to everyone, even to the people at the bottom, because the world is a business and people don't realise that. And this is where I refer to the charities when I move on to that. Charities and stuff. And these are two examples of the world being a business, apart from all the other stuff I've mentioned, which makes it obvious. Like charities, two examples of charities: Cancer Research UK and Marie Curie Cancer. I don't know about other ones, but I'm sure there are, where they're trying to say, we're charities trying to find a cure for cancer, but we can't find one. And if you fund us, it'll fund us to study and find out how cancer works to cure it. And this is what a lot of people won't know, but if you research again, do your own research, because it's been hidden from the mainstream media. There's been a cure, and the best possible cure for cancer, which I would believe, couldn't even be a better cure. But cannabis oil, cannabis oil, and it's from Mother Earth. And I bet you, if you listen to the mainstream media and never even do research, you've never heard this mentioned, I would guarantee. And it says a lot about when these supposed charities, Cancer Research UK, Marie Curie, it's trying to say they're trying to find a cure for cancer, right? When they know there's a cure for it, cannabis oil, but they keep that hidden and keep lying to you when you fund them, saying, because they make you think, they're trying to find a cure for people with cancer when they already know one. And you look at cannabis oil, it has actually cured a lot of people already, It's actually cured the cancer. And yet these charities, are still fronting, saying, you need to give us more money because we can't find cures and stuff. And it's a lie. Because, these are actually businesses, fronts. They're basically fronts as charities. They're not really charities. They're just trying to make out to be. It's just like a cover, like a wolf in sheep's clothing, or whatever, like a Little Red Riding Hood, like a nan who's, you know what I mean, trying to make it look like out she's a nan. The charity is a nice soft old lady, the charity, but it's really a wolf in sheep's clothing. They're scamming everyone funding them, you know, because they're just a business. They're just scammers trying to make themselves out to be a charity, right? And they're just taking your money, knowing there's a cure already, and they'll keep taking it off you. So yeah, the cure to cancer or the best one is no. So if you want to still fund them, it's up to you. Because the world is a business, and those people who own those are CEOs and stuff. We'll refer to the ALS Bucket Challenge, and if you do the research, and that's something I posted on my page again. If you scroll through it and find it, those people who own ALS, the Ice Bucket Challenge, who made this trend to make you pour ice water over your head to make you think you were contributing for a good cause, you'll find out that something like 27% of that money they got, right? And I think that was about 15 million what they went to the actual charity they said it was for. So 15 million, 27% of what they made went to the actual charity, and the rest of it, as I said, I'm not good with maths, but someone will realise how much that is. A lot more than what went to, guess whose pockets? The CEOs of that charity. So who's to say cancer research, especially what I said in Marie Curie cancer you're trying to make out, they can't find a cure. Who's to say that money you're donating to them isn't going to someone else's pockets? Because all they have to do is say lies, it goes to this, it goes to that, research for that. You don't know what it's really going to. As I said, a lot of people on it ironically say you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Well, it's a lot of things like to do with governments, charities and stuff. You don't know the real story behind it unless you know what's being said behind those doors and the people behind it. So yeah, you know, a lot of scams and stuff. You know, the world really is a business, and a lot of these charities and stuff that say they're doing that, there are a lot of scammers, and I wouldn't be surprised referring to the Rothschilds and stuff who have been making as much money as they can if they're actually fronts owned by them, like Cancer Research, ALS, Marie Curie Cancer, etc., etc. It's just asking yourself, critical thinking, doing research. You know, knowledge is power, as Carla says. Do your research, you know, look it up, as Vinny Paz says in the end of one of his tracks, you know. You have to do research instead of being told, you know. Critical thinking, again, this is what it's all about. This is what I'm trying to put across, you know. And then we'll refer to, this is what I've talked about before, and this is how stupid it is, but I'll say it briefly, as brief as possible. What I've noticed, if it's to do with me, I'm not sure. But it's weird how it is, but you know, I've seen recently like Theresa May and David Cameron and they've been trying to suddenly class conspiracy theorists as domestic terrorists and basically terrorist extremists. And ironically, it's supposed to be free speech. And even more, as I said, referring briefly back to the history before they did this, as I said, everyone used to be supposedly conspiracy theorists, what they're trying to make terrorists, and used to be all nutters and talking crap, and you know what I mean, and they made them look like a joke. But something's changed along the lines, whether it's to do with me, that they suddenly try to make people like me domestic terrorists. And that, why is that? Is it because a lot of people have woke up, referring back to the brainwashing machine TV stuff I said about, you know, that they realise that I've woke up a lot of people, or people like me, like David Icke have, and they're trying to shut us down, trying to shut us up, so you know that more people end up sleeping before a lot of people wake up and realise the truth. Because as I'm thinking, the only person, I don't know if it's true, but it seems I'm the actual main target of this new thing they're trying to invoke, this new law or whatever they're trying to bring in. Out of all those, you know what I mean, like Alex Jones and David Icke himself on UK Soil, I haven't heard of that dude being classed as whatever, this domestic terrorist, and that who's someone like me, conspiracy theorist, critical thinker. I wouldn't be surprised if it is me they're trying to say. So you got to ask yourself that as well, you know, because before, as I said, people like that were supposedly nutters and talk crap, and they were seen as jokes. But it's when they start getting heard and people start hearing them, Why do they need to make them criminals if they weren't before? Is it because they're speaking the truth? Critical thinking again. So you just got to ask yourself these things, you know. It's just, as I said, critical thinking, asking what you hear instead of being told. I think I've gone through most of it anyway. Just making sure I cover everything. And then, before I finish off, right, I'll go on to the this thing to do with the religious institution, Jordan Maxwell, where he says about dictating, as I said, like the Bible, and the obviously I've left religion at the end because of skeptics and atheists, but if you want to continue on to this, about dictating and manipulating in two books, religious books, what I know of is the Quran and the Bible, were about love and peace, you know. And I've noticed this myself, that in the Bible, right, there's a lot of dictateful words, you know, and that isn't about a God who's about love and peace when he tells you and threatens you. And as I said, they've both been manipulated as forms of control, you know. Jordan Maxwell says himself, you know what I mean, he doesn't know who God is, but he knows what God isn't. And what he's basically saying is he isn't someone who dictates of what's in those Bibles in the Quran to manipulate, you know what I mean, because those passages are manipulated. And I'll focus mainly on the Quran to do with the conspiracy of why Islam has been blamed since 9/11, mainly with all these false flag attacks. 9/11, Madrid 7/7. If you do your research on them and find out, you know what I mean, the truth behind, especially 9/11, 7/7, that'd be enough to tell you. But you know, like recently, Paris, Sydney, everything. False flag attacks actually by the government and blamed on Islam, so they can remain doing things in the Middle East for resources, etc., money. But all I'll say is, the Quran, it says things like kill non-believers and a lot of other things about killing. Manipulated, you know. It's at the bottom of it, you know, of the control system. You know, what the same powers have used it, which I'll leave at the end of the recording for you to hear. But as I said, we'll basically say, you know, even though Muslims may not follow this and they'll say, no, that's a lie. Well, ask yourself as a real Muslim about peace and love, when you saw those things about killing numbers, do you think that's real words about love and peace? Because even though you've been told the same as the Old Testament Bible and everything as Christians, when you're introduced to a book and you're told this is the Old Testament or this is the original Quran or even the Quran, and this is what it was written like thousands of years ago, how do you know it was? How do you know that's the original book? Only because you've been told. And you know, as I said, we'll go back to Islam and that, because this was actually used to blame Islam even more, not just Bin Laden and that went after 9/11, but I actually shown, and this was even being shown, and who they got it from, I wouldn't be surprised, government and that they've, on these 9/11 videos, the people who were skeptics or anti-conspiracy, I don't know who they were, could have been government trolls. They was using all the bad quotes from the Quran saying kill non-believers and a lot of other things to say that, to ridicule the Muslim religion, to say, well, if these Muslim extremists read this Quran and they believe these words to do that, then it makes sense that they did the attack. But as I said, we'll refer to in a minute to do with the Bible, but as I said, those books were manipulated, right? So when, as I said, referring back to these things have already been planned, World War I, II, since the Civil War, and 9/11 all been planned already anyway by the Illuminati or whatever you want to call them. So when they already pre-planned 9/11, they could say, we'll blame Islam because we'll, you know what I mean, we'll invade there. And so when it comes along, it's already been pre-written and made to look like the Quran was written thousands of years ago and touched. So when people see that and these things come up to say about the evil words, people will think, you know, well, that's it, innit? But what I don't realise is they were manipulated years and years ago. So when their plan 9/11, what they already planned, happened, they knew, you know, they knew that people would fall for it. And this is where it goes, referring to Israel itself and stuff like that about the Bible and stuff. There's a lot of I think to mention Israel in the Bible and that, referring back to the powers and who are mentioned about in the world. And all these quotes a lot to do with Israel, especially the about eating animals and stuff, which isn't right. When I saw it, wasn't right, which isn't right. I mean, it mentions Israel in that quote, which is a manipulated quote, which I could tell when I saw it. Well, there's a lot of quotes like that, and a lot of them do mention Israel, which are referred to about, and about the, what Jordan Maxwell says, what I'll leave at the end. So yeah, if the Bible's been manipulated, so has the Quran, especially what I said, theory or not, conspiracy theory or not, it makes sense if you've listened so far. So as I said, there's a lot of things in the Bible, but as I said, if you're a Christian, God isn't the person to say that you can eat animals, because if you know God as much as I do, He put everything here which has a soul and breathes as much as a right to breathe as much as you do, So, and there's a lot of other things, as I said, you'll see in the Bible, if you actually know God, if you're spiritually connected to Him, to say they're not the words of God. They're basically, all you have to see is they're dictatorful words. If words of dictatorship are used, or words to kill, or anything like that, they're not words of God, they're manipulated, And there's a lot of history behind a lot of religions, what have been manipulated, but especially the Muslim religion and the Christian religion, the books, Bible and Quran. So, it just depends, some people would get offended, but I'm just honest about these things, and this is based on logic, conspiracy, philosophy, a lot of things, man, wisdom and stuff. So you decide to listen to it, but I just speak the truth. And if I can, I have reasons, and then we'll refer to you before I leave this off. And a lot of people won't believe this thing about the third eye view. And basically the third eye view, because again, it's probably seen as something so much as the atheists see as they don't believe in God. But the third eye view is basically, it's like an invisible eye on your forehead, underneath your eye, and you basically, with this third eye view, which I believe I have, or know I have, regardless of what you think, you can see things before they happen. A lot of things, you can know things without realizing. It's just basically a power of knowing things, without other people, which people wouldn't believe, which I feel, but there's something to do with me which makes me know I've got it. As I said, referring back to that, I predicted 7/7. I had a premonition near enough, like I could sense it was going to happen before it happened. Same as 9/11 when I was about 6 years old, just playing on a computer game with a plane in it, and I was doing, without realising, subliminally doing what I was doing on that game, what was going to happen years later. And when I was about, I don't even know what happened on 9/11, on a game simulator. I didn't realise what I was doing, obviously, because I was a kid and that. But, basically, on this game there was two skyscrapers. Oh no, one skyscraper. But still, I was flying a computer game plane on it, commercial. And I was doing what happened on 9/11. I was 6 years old. I didn't even realise that. And I don't think as I said, I won't go too deep into that. But I didn't realise that I subliminally was sensing with this third eye view what I saw was going to happen on 9/11 2001. And it's the same as a bit more specific with 7/7. I actually was saying something similar to what happened, but not exactly. But I mentioned, it was the same sort of scenario, just more spread out. But I actually predicted two major things before they happened. And what you would call with a third eye, where you can have premonitions, see things before they happen, know things that other people shouldn't know. So, that's where you take your decisions. As I said, whatever I say, a lot is to do with critical thinking at the start, asking yourself, and then a lot of the things is things where you consider yourself, whether it's religious or anything like what I've said, third eye view. But I swear I'll leave it on that, But the main thing about this recording was to say about critical thinking, that in critical thinking is a tool that everyone should use, which everyone's had taken away from them, with major things. And as I said, ironically, you use it in real life, in personal situations. But when it comes to the mainstream media, you listen to what they say and you won't question it. You just sit there and accept it. And what I said at the start, and I'll use this as an example, right? It's like a stranger coming up to you in the street and saying, let's just say you've got, there's someone round the corner with £10 billion waiting for you, in a suitcase. You know what I mean? It's yours for free. That's exactly like the mainstream media sitting there and saying, this is what's happening, this is what happened in 9/11, it was terrorist. You know what I mean? You wouldn't believe that person who told you about that, someone round the corner with the money. So why do you sit there and ask, you listen to someone tell you that on the news? So you know what I mean? It's just the same thing, but it's all based on deception, everything, psychology, psychological deception. Psychology is something that you don't realise is a tool used against you. It's the main tool. The main tool used against you, psychology. It's a very powerful tool, because you can fool people with it. So yeah, using your own mind against you, with deception, psychological deception, and that's what they use on you, So yeah, you got to think about things like this, critically think. And then there's another thing I'll move on to about the power of the brain, which I was going to talk about. If you research that, we're told that everyone only uses 10% of their brain, right? And yet they're only using 10% of their brain, every person, and yet they've got 90% left in their brain of this ability, what we have, right? You've got to ask yourself, right? How come we can't use that other 90% if we only use 10% of it? Who or what is making us only use 10% of the power we have? That's a lot of power, the abilities people have nowadays, talent or whatever it is, whether it's physical, sport, anything. If you're using 10% of that ability, say you're a football player, race driver, if it's sport, anything like that, if you're only using supposedly 10% or a little bit more, but not the other full 90%, what's stopping you using that? What's making you not use it? So you know what I mean? You've got to ask yourself that as well. Because if you could use that, it surely means you'd be able to obviously perform better, whatever it was, sports or whatever. But as I said, on theory, maybe it's the way we're told that, which through again psychological deception, that if we're told to believe, if we're told you only can use, basically dictating, making us believe you can only use 10% of your brain power, that makes your brain only use to 10%. It's only conspiracy, it's only theory. But who knows? So if I told you can use 100% of your brain, psychologically your brain will work at 100%, who knows? I don't know, but And then before I leave, and this is another thing you need to do research on, something I forgot to mention on my last recording, about fluoride in your water, in your drinking water. If you research that, you find out that fluoride is a poison, and that's in your drinking water, deadly poison. You research, and that's so poisonous. That it's they put it in some kind of barrels and they can seal it up and make sure that no one, even touches a bit of it. It's that dangerous, and that's in your drinking water. And you're lied to. They tell you it's better for your teeth and that. Well, if anyone who knows science will know how poison it is more than me. I've just seen how poison it is, but it's very, very, very deadly toxic, And yeah, that's in your drinking water. And you're lied to again through deception that, that it's good for your teeth and stuff like that, but you don't know the half of it. And as I said on that track, be a critical think, you're putting fluoride in the water to make us docile, because obviously the formula for the volume of water and that is not as powerful as it could be pure, otherwise you'd die purely off the pure doses, but it's still in there. It's volumed out with a mass of water, so you're still getting enough of it, but without it killing you. But it actually makes you docile. Do the research, the effects of fluoride. I've seen it myself, and this is through scientific testing if you want to be skeptical. I think it was an animal, and basically they did the same thing with fluoride, small doses, and it was making that animal docile, basically making it not aware of what it should be aware of, because of the water and fluoride in the water. So yeah, and you know, most people, they put tap water in their cups of tea and even drink it out of tap water. They use it a lot for drinking. And what you don't realise is you actually, you know what I mean, along with this thing to do with keeping people asleep from the real truth, it's actually making you docile, unaware of things more by drinking it. Your kids and everything. Do your research on that though, yeah. And actually research what fluoride's about, you know what I mean, how deadly toxic it is and everything about the effects it can do. Just research. It's something a lot of people don't do. As I said, they don't critically think either. Two things people have been, through media deception and the people who own them, is to not research things when they do them and not critically think, not ask them, just accept those things without looking into them or questioning them. So you know what I mean? But yeah, we'll go on that. So we'll go on that, you know. There's a lot of things that people don't realise, you know, and this is why I try to put it out. You know, a lot of people won't believe, or even, you know, well, if people are on my level, they'll probably feel me on it more, but, you know, it's just weird with my background, if you know my background and why I'm here and everything about me, and especially why right now, before where it's rumoured about World War III, and at the time I've started talking about it, why I've been talking about it, to do with this third eye view, you know, why I've been talking about it and everything. You could call it coincidental, or I'll call it more than that, referring back, as I said, on the old recording, put God aside and religious views, and we'll put it on this, whatever it is. That before that, maybe 2006, 2007, before that, as I said, I used to be brainwashed. I used to just listen to the media and wouldn't even consider conspiracy videos. But since after then, not long after then, very recently, past few years, I've ended up going down that rabbit hole, as I said, from watching 9/11 videos and seeing very decent stuff that made me question that, to the point I'm at now, what I've been talking about making on music. And then you put it in the line with what's going on. And this is, again, if you want to be skeptical, you look at the news. These are rumoured, whether you put World War III aside, Russia and America conflict and everything like that, which I know is World War III, NWO, you know, more than coincidental to me, man. But it depends what you believe. You know, if you're closed-minded, and ignorant, you'll never consider it. But if you're, open-minded, or can. So that's what it's all about, you know, listening and considering what you hear. But that's what I'll just leave with you, you know. And you can make your own choice, as I always do, you know. But I thought I'd just leave it out on that, you know. So yeah, this is Mace signing out, and hope you enjoy the recording. Peace.
The more you begin to investigate what we think we understand, where we came from, what we think we're doing, the more you begin to see we've been lied to. We've been lied to by every institution. What makes you think for 1 minute that the religious institution is the only one that's never been touched? The religious institutions of this world are at the bottom of the dirt. The religious institutions in this world are put there by the same people who gave you your government, your corrupt education, who set up your international banking cartels. We have been misled away from the true and divine presence in the universe that men have called God. I don't know what God is, but I know what He isn't.
AVS Media
and unless
Demo.
and until you are prepared to look at the whole truth, and wherever it may go, whoever it may lead to, the more you educate yourself, the more you understand where things come from, the more obvious things become, and you begin to see
AVS
lies
Media
everywhere.
Demo.
You have to know the truth and seek the truth, and the truth will set you free.
World wars change worlds. And if you have a global agenda, then global problems allow you to offer global solutions. And if you look how the world was transformed by the First World War and the Second World War, the world was a completely different place after both of those wars. And the idea all along has been to have a Third World War to complete the transformation into a global state with a world government and a world army dictating to the global population.
The reason, therefore, that Israel is the biggest recipient of American aid and military support is because this hand, called the House of Rothschild, takes the money from the United States and hands it to this hand, called Israel of the House of Rothschild, and says, thank you very much. The reason that there's no questioning of Israeli nuclear capability, that they get away literally with mass murder time and time again, is because the House of Rothschild also controls the countries of the European Union and controls the European Union. I mean, Tony Blair is a yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, how high would you like me to jump sir, frontman for the House of Rothschild. So who do they put in after he left the British government as negotiator of peace in Israel? Tony Buddy Blair. What shall I say, Mr. Rothschild? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And that's it. So when you've got the same force controlling all these different agencies, then of course they're going to be coordinated. That's why Israel gets away with what it gets away with. And if people think that's anti-Semitic, well, actually anti-Semitic means anti-Arab, by the way, then they'll have to take it and shove it somewhere where the sun don't shine. Because I ain't shutting up about this, because it's fundamental to understanding the world and to understanding the European Union and world events. The Jewish people, in general, have been mercilessly used by the House of Rothschild and their front secret society, satanic secret society called Zionism, as a front which they can hide behind. So it is House of Rothschild organizations like B'nai B'rith, Sons of the Covenant, who created an organization called the Anti-Defamation League, which goes around defaming everyone, ironically, who have not just campaign for hate laws that stop you exposing these people. They've actually written the bloody legislation in America, in North America, and Canada. And so these hate laws, which say you can't say this, you can't say that because that's prejudice and all that, they're not there to protect gay people. Everyone to their own, I say. I can care less. They're not there to protect Jewish people or minorities. They're there simply to stop legitimate investigation of the Rothschilds and its network. That's what they're there for. And they are in so many ways the Rothschilds. At operational level, the center of the spider's web. And they need to be exposed, because if they get exposed and they go, when I say go, they are removed from their positions of power. Because, to be honest, if they went to jail for what they have been responsible for, the House of Rothschild, they would have to reincarnate hundreds of times to complete the sentence. And we've ignored them, or we've not ignored them. People have ignored their power for long enough because they've brilliantly hidden it. It needs the light shone on it, because when they come down, in so many ways, the House of Cards comes down. Thank you very much.